Hello, I'm Sarah, and if you're doing AP Biology right now, you've come to the right place because this is my guide on how to survive AP Biology. Okay, now that I have my Chromebook, I'll just go over a summary of what I'm going to be talking about in this video. So, first thing, I'm going to talk about the exam, so timing, how many questions there are for each section, and the weight of different units. Very important to know in terms of like studying, like if you're cutting it to the cusp and saving it for the last week to study for the exam, you really should know the weight of different units so you can have certain focus points, especially for FRQs. And I'm going to give you recommendations for notes. I'm going to give you recommendations on how to study, and also how to read from the textbook. Just general advice. I'll give you some how-tos as well, specifically focused on pedigrees, which rough for me. Okay, first things first. What's the exam going to be like? So timing, the FRQ is going to be 90 minutes, and so is the MCQ, which is a total of an hour and 30 minutes each. I know it seems long, but it'll go really fast when you're in it, so just don't focus on the timing at all. That's just going to stress you out more. Focus on your questions. And on the topic of questions, we're going to start off the MCQ, which is 60 questions, and then you're going to move on to the FRQ, which is 6 questions, and each will have 4 sections, A, B, C, and D. We're making this clear with the lettering because you're going to be needing to label each of these questions, so don't forget to write your A's, B's, C's, D's, and then answer the question. Okay, on to weighting. Pay attention for this. FRQ, MCQ, each are going to be 50% of your overall grade for the exam. And for weight for each specific unit, this is based off of over the whole exam, not just FRQs or MCQs. So Unit 1, 8 to 11%, Unit 2, 10 to 13%, Unit 3, 12 to 16%, Unit 4, 10 to 15%, Unit 5, 8 to 11%, Unit 6, 12 to 16%, Unit 7, 13 to 20%, and Unit 8, 10 to 15%. So that means do not slack on your ecology, okay? You need to pay attention to ecology. Okay, these are going to be the 3 units you want to focus on most for studying. They'll help with FRQs specifically because they're probably going to come up. Not going to lie, they are going to be the most complex unit that they're studying, in my opinion. They took me the longest to study. However, they serve as a really good information site to come back to for understanding other units, because if you look into the details and you really study into units 3, 4, and 6, specifically in the textbook, it'll make other concepts way easier to understand in upcoming units. Okay, I know I said earlier that you should study into ecology too, but units 7 and 8, just don't prioritize them because they're going to be the units that you're studying last, so most likely you'll remember the most from them. And although they are a big part of the test, they're also some of the easiest units, and they just won't take a lot of time to study. Okay, another big tip, memorize your formulas, because this year, 2025, they switched it to digital. So what you're gonna have to do to access formulas is click a little button at the top right corner, and you're gonna have to scroll through all these formulas. And guess what? That just wastes time. Fortunately for me, I did not get many calculation questions on mine, and I only get to use percentages, but of course it's not gonna be the same for everyone. And you just don't wanna waste your time on trying to find formulas. This is my last tip for taking the test. Leave your graphs for last. They're going to be the biggest time waster, and if they're complicated, they're gonna most likely take up like 10 minutes of your time, and it's not going to be worth it in the end. So just skip to your other FRQs and leave that for last. And also remember, if you get the wrong graph type, like scatter plot, line, bar, whatever, you only lost 1 point if you get it wrong. So just don't take up too much time trying to figure out the graph type either. Plus, sometimes they'll literally give you the graph type in the question. Okay, now that we're done talking about the actual exam, we can move on to note tips. So maybe notes aren't your forte, but you really need to get into note taking in AP Biology, because most likely your teacher will assign you a bunch of notes, and two, notes are honestly the best way to absorb information, and you can explore it a bit. You can suit it to your own personal tastes. Okay, my number one tip for note taking: do not distract yourself. So personally, like, notes for me are a great way to study because I'm a hands-on learner and I absorb the most information I can that way. So just try to suit your notes to how you learn. Like, are you an audio learner? Are you a visual learner? Are you a hands-on learner like me? Audio might be hard, but if you really are struggling to understand what you're writing about, try finding videos on it. And for visual learners, draw small images to like visualize your notes. 2, do not listen to music. I know some people feel more comfortable listening to music when they study, and I understand it. It feels way less draining to take notes while you're studying, but if you do listen to music, just no lyrics. Why I say no lyrics is because if you're listening to lyrics in the background, your mind is just going to be trying to listen to 2 things at once, and it doesn't allow you to absorb as much information as you could. And don't get me wrong, I've also listened to orchestral music without lyrics. I've listened to lo-fi, I've listened to brown noise even, and some songs do really get me focused, but for the most part, I still end up getting distracted. But adding on, you can try to explore this. Like, it's something personal to you. If you can match up listening to music with the information you're absorbing, that's great. Do it that way. However, just pay attention to whether you really have absorbed information to your fullest potential by the end of your study session. This is my personal experience too, but I study at the library a lot, and the background noise does distract me. So what I do is I just listen to things like brown noise or anything noise, any color noise. And it just distracts from the surroundings, but lets me focus on my studies. And this is my biggest note-taking tip. Find a note-taking style that you prefer. I meant to say prefer. But anyways, try them all. Like, so list them out. There's the Cornell method, outlining, mind mapping, charting, and flow-based. Try to find the perfect style for you early on in the year, just so you get a hang of it, and you can really find a style that suits your preference. Personally, I love outlining because it helps me branch out larger topics into smaller subunits, and I really want to try the Cornell method too. Now that notes are out of the way, we can focus on studying. So, like notes, you're going to want to find the perfect study style for you, but just keep in mind that some styles will suit other topics better than others. Like, AP Bio might suit a different type of style from AP Biology. But we are focusing on AP Bio today. So Bio, it's not memorization, okay? You just really need to go in depth into your studies. You need to learn these complicated systems because it's not vocab. It's not vocab at all. You cannot rely on your memorization to understand these things. So my first tip is, like, 2 months, 1 month before the exam, start looking over your notes and trying to absorb as much as you can through videos, articles, etc. And then go over it some more. What I recommend the most is spaced repetition, okay? It just generally helps with understanding complicated topics that you can refine with more detail over time. And I can't emphasize this enough, but use the Feynman technique. So what you're going to want to do is get a paper and write a title for the general topic you're going to study and expand on that topic. So basically, you're only going to use your mind and no resources at all to expand on the thought of this topic. And just go into detail about the system. And this is just a great method for spaced repetition as well. But if you don't want to do the Feynman technique, there is also study techniques to look into, like the Lintner system, the Pomodoro technique, and mnemonics. And mnemonics are great for hard vocab and phrases. So one of mine are for nucleic acids. It's apple tree equals arginine paired with thymine, and then car garage is for cytosine paired with guanine. Also, I really do recommend the Pomodoro technique too, and you should just use this generally for every subject. So there are like YouTube videos everywhere with this technique. Just look up study with me, and you can add like a Pomodoro thing too at the end. And so basically what it sections out to is 50 minutes for sitting / like work, and then you also get like a 10-minute break to just relax and do whatever you want. This technique is just generally great for your peace of mind, and I recommend just taking a meditation break during this time and giving your brain a break. But again, you're free to do whatever you want. Like, you could binge your Okay, biggest thing, this might be personal, but go to the library. It is my best friend at this point. It gets you away from the temptations of sleep, resting, and scrolling at home. And it's just like something about being surrounded by people who are all working around you just gets you into that focus mindset. Building off that, if you really want to like reach your highest potential of studying, go to the library alone. It is not embarrassing, and everyone does it. But if you do bring someone with, just make sure they're committed to learning the same subject as you, and maybe you can like expand off each other's ideas. But if not, just like there's a high chance you're gonna get sidetracked. I had to take a snack break. Pomodoro technique. Okay, now that we're done with studying, we're on to reading from the textbook. So I don't have any notes for this, but my number one note is take more breaks. I know it's going to be harder to focus for reading from the textbook. And the best method is honestly to find questions to go along with the textbook. It was easy for me because my teacher gave me questions to try and find info through packets. But if your teacher doesn't, just try finding some packets online. And just read carefully generally. It may be tiring, but paying attention to the textbook is going to benefit you more overall than just taking notes from a video, because you'll actually be paying attention to reading through and trying to understand what you're actually reading. And to be honest, just romanticize it completely. It helped me to think that I was a little scientist studying in a library somewhere. So maybe it'll help you too. And I know that was short, but we're already on to assignments. First thing that I can not emphasize enough, reading guides. They're really helpful if you just want a detailed understanding of the things you're trying to study or learn. These are the packets I was referencing that go over the textbook, by the way. Also, if you primarily want to go online for assignments, I really recommend the website HHMI Biointeractive. The one assignment from here that helped me the most is called Eukaryotic Cell Cycle and Cancer. This just goes over the entire cell cycle, and I think it goes over checkpoints as well. So I always referred back to that for studying the cell cycle. So now we're going to go on to how-tos. So for this last section, I'm just going to go over how to prepare notes, how to interpret FRQs / questions, and then frequently asked questions, and to top it off, pedigrees. First off, I'm gonna look for my notes. I don't know. Found them. Okay, first things first, we're gonna learn how to prepare notes. And just to let you know, throughout the coursework, I just did outlining. You can choose your own note-taking method, obviously. But right now I'm gonna work through just highlighting, I think, and outlining in general. I can show you some of my little sketches too, to show you how detailed they have to be. You just want a general understanding of the system you're working with when you take notes. With visuals, I mean. For now, I'm going to use this page for reference. And we're going to go over highlighting for now. So as you can see, with the orange color, I was just highlighting like vocab words, just buzzwords, maybe you could call it. But you also use highlighters to mark bigger topics and then smaller subunits. So it completely depends on your preference, but those are some options for you. What I also noticed on this page is I was using 2 different colors to identify either reduction reactions or oxidation reactions. So for reduction reactions, I marked it with a yellow highlighter, and then for oxidation, I marked it with blue. So that's another handy option you have. And by that, I mean you can use different colored highlighters for subjects that can be compared and contrasted, like macromolecules. Okay, this is another page I found with a diagram of photosynthesis. I can post this too. I probably have a better diagram somewhere, which I'll post. But as you can see here, I just labeled electrons, hydrogen ions. You just generally want to know where the reactants are going, and then the products and where they're going, or like where they're being released. But I do really recommend drawing diagrams out. Like, if you see it in the textbook, just draw it out, because first of all, hands-on learners will really benefit from that. And if you're a visual learner, it'll give you like a general summary of your notes down here. And if you notice notes that confuse you a bit, you can reference your diagram. That's all of the like how-to notes stuff I have for now. So now we can go on to how to interpret FRQs or questions on the exam. I didn't have much for this, but my biggest point is this depends for everyone, but personally, I like to start with the answers first and then move into the background or the description for your question. Because if you read the answers first, you get a general idea of what you're searching for in the background. And then second, this applies for all AP tests, but decide what questions to prioritize over others. If you've studied one subject more than another, prioritize the question that mentions the subject you've studied more for, and then move to the questions that are challenging you a bit later on. I think I'm going to find some FRQs to post and we can work through them. Okay, so what I'm showing you now is an FRQ question from the 2024 AP Biology exam. You can probably look this up online if it's easier to look at there, but we're going to work through this together. So like I mentioned before, I highly recommend looking at the answer first. So for this, we're going to look at part B, which says, explain how the addition of the common wild oat affects the number of native bunchgrass plants that can be supported by the California grasslands ecosystem. From that question, what we're going to look for is common wild oat, 1, and bunchgrass. And we're going to try to find their relationship within the background. Okay, we're going to read this together now. The common wild oat is a native to the regions of Europe and Asia, but is an invasive species in Central California grasslands. Okay, so here we can highlight that it is an invasive species in the California grasslands, and that's the biome we're looking for. Okay, so let's see why. In California, the common wild oat has almost completely replaced some species of native bunchgrass. So from that second sentence, we're already figuring out that the addition of the common wild oat is significantly decreasing the number of native bunchgrass. So now all we need to know is why this is happening. Okay, on to the next sentences. Researchers found that aphids, a type of small insect that often carries plant viruses, have a much higher reproductive rate in grasslands that include the common wild oat than in grasslands composed of only native bunchgrass species. Additionally, the viruses carried by the aphids appear to affect only the native bunchgrasses and not the common wild oat. Native bunchgrasses infected by the viruses have much higher death rates than do native bunch grasses that are not infected. Okay, so now we have the answer to our question because we have the 3 points that we're trying to figure out solved. So we know that the wild oat is an invasive species to the biome we're focusing on, that it is wiping out the native bunch grass population. And third, we know that it's because the common wild oat is attracting aphids, which carry a virus that specifically targets the native bunch grasses and reduces their population. Okay, and with this information from the background, we can answer part B and explain that the common wild oat is significantly decreasing the population of native bunch grass because the common wild oat happens to create higher reproductive rates for aphids, which carry a virus that affects native bunch grass. And we can also note that because these two plants are in competition, the common wild oat population will rise while the bunch grass population will decrease. Okay, so hopefully that gave a good example on how you're going to approach FRQ questions by reading the questions you're supposed to answer first and then moving on to the backgrounds. You can also apply this to MCQs, obviously. And now I'm going to just answer this one question, which I think I was most worried about, which is like, what type of questions will be on the FRQs? And this is kind of like what I said earlier, but the main units involved are going to be 6, 4, and 3. And to be more specific, that's going to be on cell communication, cellular respiration, photosynthesis, and enzymes. These are going to be the 4 biggest systems you're going to study, and they're going to help, again, study for smaller topics, but overall, the most useful for the FRQs. Okay, now, like the FRQ setup I had, I'm just going to post some information on pedigrees, because me personally, I had some issues with those, and I think it would be helpful to put that information out there. Okay, so the diagram I have posted up right now is just good to refer back to. So females will always be circles, males will always be squares. If the female or male is affected with the trait, the shape will be filled in black, and if not, it'll just be white. Then any shapes with a line through it are going to be deceased. Twins and adopted don't really matter, but miscarriage doesn't really matter either. They're oftentimes not going to bring that up. And yeah, the Roman numerals on the left side of the diagram there, those are just going to be the generation numbers. And now I'm just going to show you a few examples while I'm talking about some information on 1, how to differentiate whether the trait is dominant or recessive, and 2, whether it's autosomal or sex-linked. So first off, we need to determine whether the trait is dominant or recessive. So I'll talk about dominant traits first. Most likely dominant traits are going to appear in every generation, and the original parents, they must have the trait. There can be no exceptions for that. And then if the trait is recessive, most likely you'll see skips in generations, and also like neither of the parents are required to have the trait originally. They can just be heterozygous traits. Okay, so now that you've figured out whether the trait is dominant or recessive, we can figure out whether it's autosomal or sex-linked. And when I say sex-linked, it's usually referring to an X-linked trait. And normally you're gonna have to look out for recessive ones there when we're talking about X-linked. So for X-linked recessive traits, males are going to be more commonly affected than females because males have XY chromosome while females have XX chromosomes. So for a female to be affected, both X chromosomes would have to have the trait, while for males to have the trait, only their X chromosome would have to have the gene for it. Okay, meanwhile, in autosomal traits, both males and females are going to equally be affected because that does not relate to their differing chromosomes. Okay, so the example I have posted up here, this is from Khan Academy, by the way. If you want to look it up, it's called the Pedigrees Review by Khan Academy. Okay, so let's analyze this one. This one here is going to be an autosomal dominant. It is dominant because it is affecting every generation, as you can see. It's not skipping any generations. And also, it's pretty evenly affecting males and females. Now, this next one I have posted up, this is going to be an X-linked recessive, because as you can see, it's skipping some generations. The original parents don't necessarily show the trait, but one or both of them are probably heterozygous for it. And as you can see, only males are affected, so that's what makes it X-linked. Okay, hi, I'm back. I'm sure you missed my face, but anyways, that's all I really had on my how-tos, and now all I can really do is just recommend you some useful YouTube videos and website links. I'll post those up, but for now, all I can recommend is AP Bio Penguins. It's this AP Bio teacher who does really good video summaries of every single unit. She has some fun games and websites linked, and she has her own Quizlet too, I think. And second source, really recommend Khan Academy. I use Khan Academy for almost all of my studying. It was really handy at going in depth with certain subjects, especially their articles. I really appreciate their articles. They were kind of like the textbooks, but they were like, you know, dumbed down a bit, so they're easier to understand. And all the topics go really in depth, if not more in depth than some things. So really recommend that one. So maybe this is kind of a crazy suggestion too. If you're uncomfortable with AI, you don't have to use it. I dabbled in it a bit, but I was a bit uncomfortable because it is like new and whatever. But if you want to try using like an article summarizer, there's this one made by Google that's called Google Notebook LM. Basically what it does is it summarizes articles. You can just paste like files, or you can copy articles alone and just paste them in. It'll summarize that. It'll give you questions on topics in the article, which is actually a really handy tool. And the thing that I found really cool about it was that it turns the article summaries into like podcasts too. So there's these like two voices that talk about it, and you can even cut in and ask questions about the topic they're talking about. And so for those audio learners out there, that's really useful. Okay, well, that's all I really wanted to talk about today. I hope you get a 5 on those AP Bio exams, and I wish you luck on your study journeys, and I hope you survive. And so does Marilyn Monroe in the corner here. She has gotten me through this.